What if humans are not causing climate change? Should we still change the way we're managing our planet's resources? Let's talk about that on today's episode of The Empathic Ecologist. Empathy is a human superpower. It sparks our curiosity, engages our compassion, and animates our connection to all living things. Let us journey together towards understanding as we sail through space on this amazing ship we call planet Earth. This is The Empathic Ecologist. Hey, ecologists! So, for this week's video, I am going back to the one-take wonder format that I used to implement. I did a lot of experimentation in my last video, going back and forth with different angles and reading a script and all of that. And I just haven't had the time, to be honest with you, to prepare that this month. It's been a crazy month. So many things going on in my personal life, my professional life. I have gotten some reading and some research done, but not the amount of production preparation that I would like to have, including no written script. So you're getting one take just like you used to get from me in the past. So, on to today's topic. This is a hypothetical. The more evidence I look at, the more I am becoming convinced that we are contributing to climate change. So, those of you who might have been worried because of the title, I'm still leaning that direction in terms of the evidence. But this might be for those who are still highly skeptical about that, for whatever reason, whether it's because of the political party that you associate that perspective with. I think it is fair to say that in America, more Democrats tend to be believers in artificially induced climate change, if you will, than Republicans. I think that's a fair statement. I think it's an accurate statement. So maybe that's part of the reason for your hesitation or your skepticism. Or maybe you're more like me, where you're just a natural skeptic and you want to see the hard science. You want to see the evidence. You want to see repeated results, which I think anyone should want to see, especially for something as big as this. And if we're going to require, if governments who have the power to enforce it, governments who have militaries, right, who have the power to enforce changes on the populace, are asking for dramatic changes in the way that we manage and use our resources on this planet, then yeah, we better see some damn good evidence that this is really happening and that we are really contributing to it. And I'm not saying I'm 100% convinced on that yet. I have not studied enough. There's a lot of data to go through, to be honest with you. And I also want to see firm evidence that there is indeed a genuine scientific consensus, across the board in most fields that are relevant to climate science. I have not personally seen the evidence for that. I've heard a lot of people say that it exists, but I've not personally surveyed the scientific literature to the extent that I myself am satisfied. Again, for something this serious, if we're demanding, which it will be, people are talking about pretty drastic changes happening in the next 10 to 30 years, right? Particularly by 2050. There's some very, very dramatic changes that are being proposed in things like the Paris Climate Accord. And like it or not, whether you believe that we're contributing to climate change or not, if those changes go down, it will have an impact on our societies, right? It will have an impact on the global economy. I think initially it'll probably be a negative impact. Over the long term, hopefully that will be a net positive. I mean, that's the idea, that it will be a net positive. But in the short term, it's going to be rough, right? It's going to be rough. So I'm still researching the science, but what if I come to the conclusion, after researching all the science, that this is not as serious as many people are saying it is, and that we're really not contributing much? Again, that's not where I'm leaning right now. I think that's unlikely, but for sake of argument, let's say I come to that conclusion after studying the evidence for a long period of time. Should we still change the way that we utilize our resources, particularly fossil fuels? Should we still change the way that we're utilizing those resources? And I would argue, yes, we should. We should still alter the way that we're doing that. And even the oil companies, who still to this day are making record profits off of
the sale of oil around the world. Even they know this, And to some degree, this is just common sense or common business sense, if you will. Petroleum, that's the refined form, but oil is a limited natural resource. I don't think we can say for sure exactly how much is still left, but there are attempts, like British Petroleum in particular publishes an annual, I don't know if it's annual, but they publish a report. This is according to the worldindata.com. They have a lot of excellent charts that give you information on like fossil fuel usage around the world by country, by type. You have oil, you have natural gas, and you have coal. And then, of course, they also take a look at what are our current reserves, our energy reserves, what are the resources that we know are available. And I guarantee you that the oil companies are researching all of this, and they're searching for new resources all the time. But I've noticed they're also attempting to diversify and get into things like cleaner energy or just alternate forms of energy, because they know oil is not an inexhaustible resource, and it is not a renewable resource as far as we know, right? For it to be created, there has to be now I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding is has to be a cataclysmic event, not a worldwide cataclysmic event. It could be localized, but a lot of biomass has to be collected in the same spot and be pressurized, right, for oil to eventually form. Again, I'm not an expert on that. Don't quote me on that, please. That's my very basic understanding of it. So, in other words, a lot of organic life has to die in order for this resource to be created in the first place. Carbon-based life forms must die. A lot of them must die. So, unless we find some magical way to create it in another way, synthetic oils, I don't know, maybe that already exists. It probably does. Again, not an expert, but generally speaking, like crude oil, if you will, is not a renewable resource unless a bunch of biological life, sorry, I didn't say that right, unless a lot of biological life dies at the same time and gets packed together and in a pressurized environment and sealed into the earth, so to speak, and then later on we can come and pump it out. Contrast that with solar power, for one. Now, I understand that some of the components that go into making solar panels are not renewable resources. We're mining minerals from the ground for some of these solar panels, and that's not an inexhaustible resource in itself. But the energy source, again, not completely inexhaustible. One day the sun will die, but scientists tell us, at least most of the scientists I've heard talk about this, that's millions and millions of years away, if not a couple billion years away. So obviously we and succeeding generations, like, there's a good chance that Homo sapiens won't exist on this planet anymore, at least not in any form that we would now recognize by the time the sun finally dies. That's if we don't blow up the planet first, which we could do. Not necessarily the planet literally, but like decimate the surface of the planet through nuclear warfare. And I hope that does not happen. I wish I could just flip a switch and destroy every nuclear weapon on the face of this planet, at once, as well as all the knowledge and the technology and how to make it. I wish I could do that, but I can't. It's Pandora's box. We've opened it. We can't put it back in, at least not with any. Yeah, it's not going back in, unfortunately. So I just hope we're able to continue refraining from using that shit. And I say that knowing that my country to date is the only one that has used atomic weapons. And I hope that Hiroshima and Nagasaki are the only two such wartime events that ever occur. I sincerely hope that. Different topic, though. So, assuming we don't blow up the surface of the planet and create a nuclear winter, and life continues on, eventually we will run out of crude oil. At least we will not have enough to sustain our standard of living. So there's a few options for that. One, which I think we should do, is change our standard of living, i.e., reduce consumption. I think that's smart anyway. Not only is it more cost efficient, it's going to save money. If we learn to be more efficient with our usage of fuels, fewer wasted trips to the grocery store. I mean, as simple as that level, like combined trips, use less fuel. I think going electric, even in areas that have coal power plants, is a more efficient use of fossil fuels. Even, like I said, even if the local power plant that runs your area's power grid is coal, going electric is still going to be a more efficient use in the long run than continuing to use internal combustion engines, from what I understand. Again, not an expert on that. Don't quote me on it. That's just my opinion based on the evidence I've seen thus far. That's much more efficient use of energy, even if that electrical energy is being produced through the burning of coal at a coal power plant. It's still a more efficient use of fossil fuels, or say an oil power plant or a natural gas power plant. Still more efficient use. So I think that's one thing we need to do is reduce consumption, minimize that shit, right? Remember I talked about, can minimalism save the world? Well, I can sure as hell try, right? If we minimize our possessions, if we stop mass producing so much shit, especially plastics and especially single-use plastics, we need to stop that. That's another use, right, of, in a sense, fossil fuels. I mean, we use oil to make plastics. We need to stop that. We need to stop this single-use shit. Stop it. Coca-Cola, are you hearing me? Stop making plastic bottles. Stop buying them. Use something biodegradable. At the very least, start putting the chemicals into the plastic that help it to biodegrade faster. But preferably, stop using plastic so we don't have to deal with toxic microplastics in our oceans and in our food for decades, maybe even centuries to come. Stop it. Stop it, Coca-Cola. Stop it, Pepsi. You have the power to do that. You got a lot of fucking money. You could transition to another use. Do it. Do it now. Start now if you haven't already. Please do. Yeah, and for those of us as consumers, buy glass bottles whenever you have the option. Either don't buy the shit at all, or buy it in a glass bottle or an aluminum can, which are much easier to recycle and recapture. Right? And the glass bottle, as I understand it, is generally biodegradable, right? Glass, I mean, it's just sand that got heated up, superheated sand. That's essentially all glass is. So it can biodegrade and go back into the ground, right? Much easier than plastic can. Now, I don't understand all the chemical properties of plastic and why that is, but yeah, we need to be smarter with how we use our resources. We need to waste less. We need to be more efficient. Lean Six Sigma is something that my current company is trying to implement, and the basic idea is that we're trying to make our operations all across the board more efficient, including the realm that I work in, which is purchasing and buying, like even my internal processes, but also like shipment choices, packaging choices, all across the board. I want to make that more efficient. I want to make that lean, mean, streamlined machine, right? So let's do that across the board. It starts with us as consumers, but it also starts with those of you who are in power over large companies, over corporations. Like in many ways, you have more power than entire governments of countries. You can make a difference. CEOs, if you're watching this shit, or someone VP, COO, Pepsi started in my state. I live in North Carolina. Pepsi's headquarters are here in my state. Hey, if you happen to be watching this, anyone involved in Pepsi, if you're not already talking about this, you need to start. Phase out the use of single-use plastics. Please, for the sake of our ocean life, we're not going to have any more ocean life if we keep overfishing and keep dumping our plastic waste into the oceans. And one of the ways we can stop dumping plastic waste is by stopping the production of it in the first place. And I'm not expecting like 100% reversal within the next 10 years. That's not realistic. But let's reduce. Like, this has been going on since at least the 80s, since I was a kid. I've been hearing these words: reduce, reuse, recycle. Reduce, reuse, recycle. First one, reduce consumption. Reuse that shit. Again, another way of reducing consumption. And then recycle, another way of reducing the consumption of the materials from the raw, in the raw material state, right? The oil in the ground. You're not going to need more oil if you find ways to reuse the plastic that's already been made, for one. I say by 2030, let's stop the production of new plastic across the globe. We can do that shit, right? We humans, when we put our minds together and choose to cooperate on something, we can do some pretty amazing things, right? Why not that? No new plastic. Like, I have a shirt that says plastic free by 2025. Why the hell not? Let's at least go for 2030. 2050 at the very latest. I mean, come on, people, we can do it. It starts with you and me. If we have networking or influence with anyone that is in power with these companies or these corporations or with governments, let's leverage that, right? Leverage that shit. Talk to those people when you get a chance. I need to do more of that myself. It's one of the reasons this YouTube channel exists, but just person to person. Like, there's little that's more effective than that interpersonal relationship, face-to-face interactions. This is like the second best thing. You have video interactions where you can see my face, you can hear my voice, but it's not as effective as in-person interactions. Take somebody out for a drink, take them out to dinner, pay for it yourself, make your case. I'm preaching to myself here. We can do this shit. So, coming back around to the topic of this video, even if our carbon emissions are making a negligible impact on the global temperature, even if it's a negligible impact, even if that's true, we still need to make significant changes to the way that we utilize this planet's resources, because they're not inexhaustible and many of them are not renewable. And we are going to decimate the face of this planet, and it will eventually catch up with our species. And let's not foist all that shit off on our grandkids or our great grandkids. Let's not do that, okay? I know we're not going to be around. We're going to die just like everybody else. We're going to die before a lot of that shit hits the fan. Let's not put that on our grandkids. Let's not do that, okay? Let's try to make the world a better place and teach them to do the same, and then break the cycle of abuse and the raping of the natural world. Right? Let's break it. Break that cycle. Let's do it. All right. Don't know what that was. Peace, fellow humans. Stay curious and be healthy.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of the Empathic Ecologist channel. If you would like to get in touch with me, you can follow me on Twitter at EMP_ecologist or on Instagram at ourbest_WS. You can also email me, lifeisherevlog@gmail.com. Be sure to check out the blog as well. The website is www.empathicecologist.blogspot.com. Until next time, my fellow ecologists, stay curious and be healthy.